War was ending, but the trauma was beginning to bloom like something poisonous in the soil of survival. In Kanagawa Prefecture in September 1945, American forces moved through the countryside with the efficiency of an occupation reshaping an entire nation. Outside Yokohama, in a small agricultural region where rice fields stretched toward distant mountains, something different was unfolding. Villages clung to hillsides like fading memories, and the women emerging from the work camps were not soldiers returning in triumph. They were forgotten casualties of a war that consumed their youth and stole their futures. Many had been conscripted into military factories, forced into labor battalions, or held in unmarked facilities. Others were moved so often their own families lost track of them. They carried scars that didn't show on medical forms, wounds invisible to the eye, trauma that would take decades to surface. When an American soldier arrived at the edge of their makeshift recovery shelter, he did not resemble the victorious image projected by officials. His name was Thomas Haraway, Tom to everyone who knew him. A 19-year-old farm boy from Iowa, with calloused hands and eyes that struggled to grasp the complexity around him. Drafted at 18, deployed the same year, he now stood in a quiet corner of occupied Japan. He had never seen combat, though he'd been trained for it relentlessly. The war ended before he shipped out, leaving him in the strange role of representing American authority in a place where that authority was both overwhelming and invisible. He felt unprepared. Tom moved through the provisional camps with hesitant uncertainty, aware he wasn't ready for what he witnessed. His first encounter with the women came on an autumn morning, when the season's early chill touched the warmth of late summer lingering in the air. 14 women were in the facility that day, ages ranging from 23 to 47, though many looked older. Their bodies bore the exhaustion of years in factories and labor camps. They were receiving paperwork to shift from wartime status to civilian survivors. Tom was assigned to assist with paperwork and translation, although his Japanese was mostly memorized phrases from a handbook. Yuki, who would become their leader, approached him with cautious directness, reading his face the way she had learned to survive. She was 34 but looked closer to 50, her frame thin from rationed living. A former teacher, her education had shaped her into an organizer even in ruin. "You are not comfortable here," she said in careful English, learned from an American prisoner. Tom was startled by her observation. He tried to respond professionally, but his voice cracked with uncertainty. Yuki smiled, an expression not of hierarchy or fear, but of shared vulnerability. She recognized that he was as displaced as she was. From that moment, a different kind of relationship began forming, one that did not fit neatly into military protocol or occupation hierarchy. Over the following weeks, Tom became a regular presence at the facility by the women's own request. It started with small tasks. Yuki asked for help with tangled paperwork. Akira, in her 30s and orphaned by the bombing of Tokyo, asked for assistance understanding American forms. Mo, a factory worker injured during labor, simply sat with him in healing silence. These interactions weren't romantic. They were deeper, traumatized individuals recognizing that another person's presence could be a kind of medicine. Tom's superiors noticed his frequent visits and worried about fraternization rules. But his conduct was entirely appropriate, and any investigation revealed nothing improper. He translated, organized logistics and processed documents. Everything was within regulations, yet officers sensed a connection forming beyond official boundaries. Major Wells, his commanding officer, called him in for a conversation disguised as casual but heavy with warning. He stressed that the women's trauma was unimaginable, and Tom's growing involvement might deepen their pain when he was reassigned. Tom heard the real message. Emotional connection could be more dangerous than breaking a regulation. Attachments couldn't be undone with paperwork. But he also knew something the Major didn't, that being seen with dignity was already healing the women. Yuki noticed Tom's changed demeanor after the meeting. Having spent years decoding the movements of power inside factories, she sensed when authority shifted. She asked to meet privately in a small, empty counseling room where truths could be spoken. Choosing her words with care, she explained that the major was correct. They would suffer when he left. But they accepted this. Moments of kindness matter, she said. More than futures we cannot control, you see us. In the camps we were not seen. Tom felt something solidify. He realized some rules were built to prevent honest human connection. He decided he would continue helping these women, whatever consequences followed. Yuki touched his arm gently, an acknowledgement, not romance. The other women soon understood the bond forming between Tom and Yuki, not through words, but through small shifts. Yuki advocated more confidently for them. She organized their paperwork with precision, ensuring everyone received proper medical access. Tom assisted without realizing the full scope of what he was enabling. Meanwhile, the women expressed gratitude in subtle cultural gestures. Hannah, whose hands were damaged from textile work, began teaching Tom to prepare simple Japanese meals. She showed him how to hold chopsticks, how to approach food with quiet gratitude, and how shared meals could be a form of healing. As autumn deepened and the air grew colder, the women finally approached Tom with a request that startled him. Yuki, speaking for all of them, asked him to understand their request not as a soldier, but as a young man they trusted. They wanted his help leaving the facility, not escaping, but resettling with proper documentation to rebuild their lives. Japan's government was in chaos. Military structures were collapsing. The women, classified as released PS, were trapped in a bureaucratic limbo that could swallow them forever. They needed someone within the system to recognize their humanity. Tom felt torn between duty and the reality he saw daily. Yuki sensed his conflict and spoke softly. "We are not asking you to betray your uniform," she said. "We are asking you to see that the war is over. Rules built for war no longer fit our lives." She explained that freedom, dignity, and the right to rebuild were the very ideals the Allies claimed to defend. Helping them wasn't betrayal, it was alignment with the war's stated purpose. Her words struck him with clarity and truth. Tom made his decision. He would help them. He would navigate military bureaucracy, use his access carefully, and build pathways for each woman to resettle. Not by breaking rules outright, but by bending the system to serve justice instead of protocol. He began documenting each woman's situation, creating records that identified them as civilians rather than wartime laborers. He cooperated with Japanese local authorities, slowly re-establishing governance. He reunited women with family when possible. When family ties were gone or dangerous, he helped them settle in communities offering work and safety. This process stretched over months and required coordination that technically broke no rules, but pushed every boundary of the occupation's intent. Tom's role evolved. No longer just a farm boy processed into military duty, he became an efficient handler of repatriation cases. His superiors praised him, believing he was reducing their workload by clearing the facility faster than expected. They never realized he was clearing the facility according to the women's own plan. Yuki coordinated every step, and Tom executed it with precision. Their quiet partnership moved beneath the notice of officials who saw only paperwork, not people. Mo was the first woman to leave. Tom connected her with a textile collective in Kyoto that was rebuilding manufacturing capacity. The owner, once a colleague of her father, agreed to take her in based on Tom's carefully prepared recommendation. When Mo departed, she bowed deeply, honoring him in a gesture Hannah had taught him carried profound meaning. She handed him a small, handwritten note in careful English. "You gave me back my future. I will remember you when I look at the sky." One by one, the women followed. Akira moved in with distant relatives in Niigata. Hannah stayed in the region, working in a small restaurant where her damaged hands could still prepare meals. Others relocated to communities rebuilding after devastation. By early 1946, more than half the women had resettled through Tom's quiet coordination. The once crowded facility grew emptier each week, and as it emptied, Tom realized how much of himself he had poured into their futures. Something unexpected happened as they prepared to leave. Each woman, in her own way, asked Tom the same question. They wondered if he would allow them to care for him, emotionally, spiritually, or simply through memory, once he was reassigned. They wanted to give back what he had given them, even if the military would never acknowledge such gestures. Yuki voiced it most directly while they completed Sachiko's paperwork for her move to Osaka to live with her sister. "You returned our lives to us," she said. "We cannot repay you in ways the military accepts. But we can love you, we can remember you. What we build next, your kindness is part of it." Her words carried gratitude beyond romance or friendship. Tom felt the weight of her truth. Yuki wasn't offering affection in a romantic sense, but speaking a deeper language, the gratitude of people whose humanity he restored. He answered through action, not speech, by ensuring their futures stayed connected. Tom began documenting not only their resettlement, but their ongoing status. He created informal channels so they could reach him. His role shifted from military clerk to guardian, a witness to their survival, a bridge between trauma and hope. As spring approached and the facility emptied, Tom received new orders. He was being transferred to Tokyo, and soon after, likely sent back to the United States as occupation forces downsized. The news struck him harder than he expected. He wasn't afraid of leaving the military. He was afraid of abandoning the women who had come to trust him. He felt responsible for their futures in a way that went beyond duty. Leaving meant losing the ability to protect the fragile stability they'd gained. Tom asked for a final meeting with Yuki before his departure. They didn't meet in the administrative office, but at a small shrine she had shown him months earlier, a quiet place that had become sacred to them both. It was the place where they had first understood each other without full vocabulary, where silence translated what language could not. Now it became the place where they confronted the reality of parting. Yuki brought a small wooden box, hand-carved by someone she trusted. She held it carefully, as though it contained something alive. Her eyes carried a calm acceptance, but also a depth of emotion she rarely allowed anyone to see. Inside the box were photographs, small, fragile images of each woman he had helped. Some were taken before the war, others after their resettlement. Each one represented a life he had touched, a life that now carried the imprint of his compassion. "These are our proof," Yuki said softly. "Proof that we lived. Proof that you helped us live. When you look at these, remember that your kindness traveled with us. It will continue long after you leave." Tom felt the moment anchor itself in him. He understood that these photographs were not gifts, they were trusts, testimonies, evidence of survival placed in his hands so their stories would not disappear into military archives or political silence. The wind moved lightly through the trees of the shrine, carrying the scent of spring. Tom bowed his head, not as a soldier, but as a man acknowledging the weight of what had been given to him. He promised he would not forget them. Yuki nodded, sensing the sincerity in his voice. She stepped closer, not touching him, but standing near enough that he felt the gravity of her presence. "You changed our lives," she said. "Not as a soldier, as a human being." For a moment neither of them spoke. The silence between them was full, of gratitude, of grief, of the strange bond that had grown in a place built from suffering. It was a silence that acknowledged everything they could not say aloud. Yuki finally lifted her gaze. "Where you go next we cannot follow. But what you did here, it will follow us." Her voice didn't tremble, but the weight behind her words was unmistakable. She was giving him permission to leave and asking him not to forget. Tom felt a tightness in his chest. Leaving Japan suddenly felt like losing an entire part of himself. But he also understood that staying was impossible. The military machine would move him along, and he had no power to resist it. He bowed deeply to Yuki, honoring her formally for the first time. She returned the gesture with equal depth. Two worlds, once divided by war, meeting in a single shared acknowledgement of respect and connection. When he finally stepped back, Yuki spoke again. "Do not carry guilt, carry memory. Guilt is heavy, memory gives strength." Her words settled into him with the clarity of truth. They were a final gift, something to guide him long after he left Japan. Tom walked away from the shrine with the wooden box pressed to his chest. Each photograph inside felt like a heartbeat. He knew he would keep them for the rest of his life, not as trophies, but as reminders of the lives he had helped restore. As he prepared for his reassignment, he wrote messages to local officials and contacts he trusted, ensuring the remaining women would continue receiving support. He couldn't stay, but he could leave a structure behind them. On the morning of his departure, he stood at the edge of the camp one last time. The buildings were quiet. The women who remained were already beginning new routines, building new futures, proof of resilience rising from devastation. Tom boarded the military truck, the wooden box tucked safely in his pack. As the engine rumbled to life and the camp receded behind him, he felt the bittersweet truth settle in his heart. He had arrived in Japan a soldier, but he was leaving a witness.